Welcome back to our classroom. Today I'm joined by Erin Williamson, Chief Program and Strategy Officer at Love 146, where she leads efforts to prevent child trafficking and exploitation. With over 20 years of experience in social services and child protection, Erin has developed trauma-informed programs that have reached thousands of vulnerable youth across the United States. She's also a parent, advocate, and expert in human trafficking, prevention, and survivor care. And we are going to be talking about protecting our children, navigating online safety, trafficking prevention, and trauma informed care. Thank you, Erin Williamson. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation.
Oh, my pleasure. It's a critical conversation to have because there's obviously a great concern about human trafficking and how it impacts our children, but there's also a lot of ignorance. And I think folks are working off of the notion of Hollywood
Yes.
portrayals and the drama of those Hollywood portrayals. And I don't want to take anything away from that, but the reality is often more subtle and complex. What are the most common ways children are at risk today, and what warning signs should educators and school staff be looking for?
Absolutely. There's a number of ways in which children are at risk today. Some of them are the same as 10 or 20 years ago, and some of them are different because we do have the internet and social media, and that has changed
Mm,
kind of the course of the game. So traffickers really exploit vulnerabilities. So we see a lot of youth who might have housing insecurity or food insecurity. They might be system involved. Traffickers are going to promise them to meet their basic needs, to help them get, their bellies full or find a place to stay, or be the dad that they're missing, be the parents that they've always wanted, be the older brother or older sister. And so it's really about what are that child's vulnerabilities,
mm.
and then the trafficker is going to promise to meet those vulnerabilities.
Wow.
So the vulnerabilities stay the same online and offline. The main difference is in person, a trafficker really has to focus on one child at a time or two children at a time. Online, they can be focusing on 200 kids to see who's going to bite and who are they most likely to be successful exploiting.
That's scary. That's scary, and it angers me. But I know just sitting in that anger is not going to do anything. So let's talk about things that we could be paying attention to. And you mentioned technology, and we know that's evolving rapidly. And you got social media and gaming platforms that have become prime areas where predators attempt to exploit children. What are some of the biggest digital threats facing students today, and how can educators, parents work together to teach children about online safety?
Yeah, so I think, we are assuming kids understand online safety in a way that they just don't, right?
Right. So we
They
got to
don't understand.
suspend our assumptions.
100%. Kids do not know about default settings or privacy settings. We really do as educators, as parents, as important adults in these kids' lives, start with the basics. I know that there's a lot about don't share your password, don't share your home address, but we always talk about it in the sense of don't do it with strangers. And the thing to remember about predators is that by the time they're exploiting a child, that child doesn't identify them as a stranger. They
Mhm.
identify them as their best friend or their boyfriend or their parent, the only person who's ever listened to them, who's really understood them. So I think we actually also have to start by stop talking about this meeting strangers online or meeting people you don't know online and how they can exploit. I think what we really have to talk about is what is a healthy relationship online and offline, and where are those turning points, right? And they are different on and offline. Online, there's turning points like, can you share a secret with me? Can you share a photo with me, right? Can you share something with me that I can then use to blackmail you? Or can I meet you offline? You
Mhm.
don't see that as much in person, right? In person, there's actually like, let's miss curfew. Let's run away for the night together. Let's physically take you away from your family, your
Mhm.
friends, and have that separation. Online, it's more of a what can I then use to manipulate you? So we really need to, in both of those situations, talk about what is a healthy relationship? What do you do when you start to feel like someone's asking you for things that they shouldn't be asking you? And again, also as educators and parents, really stop this notion of there's safe people you can go to, like teachers or law enforcement or clergymen, and then there's unsafe people. Because what we also find is sometimes traffickers purposely go into those safe positions in order to exploit kids. And so we
Wow.
just have to be careful about making sure we just talk about safe and unsafe adults, but not tied to a title.
So we have to point out the posers because we have individuals who are posing as friend, as trusted adult, as maybe someone who could teach you something or somebody who really cares about you. But unfortunately, that's just a tactic that they're using to hook the children in.
Exactly. And the example I oftentimes use with older adults, middle, even kind of going down to into fifth grade is if you went on a date with somebody and they hit you, they punched you that first time you went on a date with them, you wouldn't go on a second date with them, right? And kids get that, right? And I say, that's not how intimate partner violence works, right? They start out by being this awesome person and treating you really well. And slowly over time, they start. And the same is true for grooming and recruiting for trafficking and exploitation. They're
Mm.
not going to tell you up front, by the way, in 3 months, I'm going to ask you to send me a photo that's explicit. By the way, I'm going to start pulling you away from your friends and family. They're not going to tell you that.
So there are children who experience all types of trauma. For children that have experienced trauma, including trafficking or exploitation, school can either be a place of healing or a place where those traumas are reinforced. What practical steps can teachers take to create trauma-informed classrooms that support students in their healing journey?
I love that question. Actually, we're being externally evaluated, and our evaluators just wrote up some findings. And one of the findings they found was that the more connected a child is to school, the more likely they are to disclose victimization.
Mm.
I mean, think about that. Like that just shows you how important school is. So if children feel connected to people at school, if they feel that their teachers care about them, or that there's a guidance counselor that cares about them, they are more likely to disclose what might be happening to them outside of school. So you guys are critically important to these kids' lives, even if they don't say it and they don't always show it. And sometimes they're pushing you and testing you, right? Are you still going to like me if I scream at you? Are you still going to be there for me if I push you? We find a lot that our kids test us before they disclose information. And so some of the things to think about are, are there ways for kids to come and tell you when they are feeling triggered in a classroom, right? You can raise your hand and say, I need to go to the bathroom, but you can't raise your hand in a class and say, I'm feeling triggered. This is bringing up something in me.
Mm.
And yet we're teaching things that we should assume are going to be triggering for some of our kids, right? When we have, when we have classes talking about drug use, there are going to be some kids in that classroom whose parents might be using drugs, whose brothers or sisters might be, who might have somebody that they know who overdosed, right? So we have to remember when we talk about health class and sex education, that can also be triggering. There are probably kids in those classes who have experienced sexual violence. And so we should preempt some of our classrooms by saying, this might be hard information. And if you're feeling like you need to take a break, and then we give them options, right? And that's going to be different for different age groups and different classrooms and different district and school rules. But I think thinking about, okay, we want to cover this material. We want to cover online safety, for example. Assume that there might be a kid in your classroom that has had a bad experience online, right? And so you want to preemptively tell that child, hey, if any of you are feeling this way, because you don't know which child it is as a teacher, here is something you can do. And you might be feeling this way because something's happened or whatever reason. If you need a break from this, here is where you could go or what you could do. And then allow for that, right? But creating those safe spaces and preemptively telling kids that you recognize that some of this material might be hard is also inviting them back in to come and talk to you about those things. Because again, they're identifying you as you're a safe person, you're someone who gets it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's a helpful reminder to us about, again, suspending our assumptions of what kids have or haven't experienced and ensuring that we're creating those safe spaces in the school environment so that kids feel connected to us and are willing to share. And then obviously just being strategic, mindful, and careful about how we are approaching our young people. I want to zero in on myths and misconceptions about child trafficking. Um, Misinformation about trafficking is widespread, and it leads some people to focus on the sensationalized cases rather than everyday realities of exploitation. What are some of the biggest myths about child trafficking, and how can educators be better informed to protect students in the real world? And you started to get it into this a bit, but I think it'll be helpful to elaborate a bit more on some of these myths so that it's fresh in our minds and we're hopefully more readily um, equipped to spot different situations that we might have to bring to the attention either of the school principal or the counselor or the authorities. Um,
Absolutely. So some of the common myths that we hear are things like, oh, it involves kidnapping,
mm,
or it always involves physical violence. People are held against their will. Those are kind of the primary myths that kids and adults really have. And to your point, as you mentioned, some of that is because of what we have seen in the media, in movies. We've reinforced that also the concept that it's a stranger, right? Because again,
wow, that's
usually these
important.
individuals, right, they really do ingratiate themselves into these kids' lives before they exploit them. Have we ever seen kidnapping or physical violence or a stranger? Yes, but that is not common. That is the exception to the rule in terms of what we see when we're coming across kids.
Really,
What we oftentimes see is we see kids that maybe are not regularly attending school. Maybe they're attending, but they're skipping classes here and there. Maybe they're just not attending school. Only about a little over half of the kids referred to us for services are regularly attending school. So if you have a kid irregularly attending school, that's kind of something to notice, right? Kids coming into the classroom with items that you know that their families probably could not afford, or you know that there's system involved and are not sure how you get the money. I think we tend to assume maybe that there's drug dealing going on or that some other kind of activity or criminal activity is going on, but that can also be indicative that someone is giving them those helping take them out to get their nails done or their hair done or get them a new backpack or a new cell phone, right? If they have different items that you're not sure how they got them, asking them, where did you get it? How did you get it? Who got that? Just kind of ask, oh my gosh, I love your nails. When did you get that done? How did you get that done? Or, oh, that's a new cell phone. Asking those questions where you're kind of following the money can help identify where is this coming from and just again start to generate that conversation. We do see a significant connection between kids who have previously been sexually abused and trafficking victimization, or kids that are just not sure about their identity and are kind of exploring different identities and being taken advantage of as a result of that. And so, again, there are certain kids that traffickers do tend to target because of their vulnerabilities. And so, keeping that in mind when you're looking out across your classroom and you're noticing, you know what, so and so always has their head down, right? They always seem to be falling asleep in class. Why is that, right? If a kid is going home and theoretically getting a good night's sleep and theoretically getting their needs met, ideally they could stay awake in class, but if they're regularly missing or falling asleep in class, if you see shifts and changes, I think don't always assume that there's some sort of delinquent behavior on their part. I think, again, society has trained us to, in some ways, put the blame on kids, especially as kids
mm,
get older, right? In middle and high school. It's what are they doing? as opposed to what is happening in their life that is causing this situation. And I think just reshifting that narrative internally can shift how you approach a child.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that because that's a real thing. That's a real thing in terms of sometimes we do put the blame on the learners, on our children, on the students, instead of remaining curious, right?
Yeah.
Peeling back the layers of the onion to get at the origin of the behavior.
Yep.
What is causing this behavior? Can we talk about action steps for schools and communities? Because educators often feel overwhelmed by the responsibility of keeping students safe while also meeting academic demands. What are three concrete actions that schools, teachers, and parents can take today to build a culture of safety and awareness around child trafficking prevention?
Yeah, well, I would be remiss if I did not mention that we do have a prevention education curricula that has been implemented in schools across the nation. And oftentimes, where schools choose to implement that program is in their health class because it meets a lot of the healthcare requirements that states have for teaching kids about healthy relationships and online safety. So, our curricula is called Not a Number, and you can get more information on it on our website, which is love146.org. But in addition to kind of having a more formalized curricula where you kind of do go step by step learning healthy relationships and all of these things, creating, like I said, that environment, right?
Mm,
Kids are going to have an instinctual sense of which are the teachers that are going to create space for them to come to, and which are the teachers that kind of rush them out the door, don't seem to have time for them, really are seeing this more as a job, maybe even are feeling burnt out, right? Kids instinctively understand that. And it doesn't just have to be a teacher, right? You could be the guidance counselor. You could be the school nurse. You could be the admin person at the front desk that just says hi to the kids, especially identifying the kids who might be having a harder time at home, right? Oftentimes schools are aware of which kids are coming from households where stuff might be going on, or kids who are really struggling a little bit more in school. So creating those spaces, especially looking out for those kids, is really, really important. And then finally, honestly, you can actually say to kids, look, I'm just going to tell you, if any of you ever have anything that you want to talk about or anything that you feel like you need to go to and you need to find a safe adult, I am here. Please feel free to come and talk to me. I think, again, a lot of us assume as adults that as people who self-identify as a safe adult, I'm a social worker, right? That's how those of us who are social workers self-identify as safe adults, teachers the same way. We assume kids should know that about us,
mm,
right? We're a teacher, we're a social worker. And in fact, oftentimes they don't, especially the kids that are being manipulated, right? Traffickers tell our kids, no one's going to believe you. No one's going to care. This is who you are. They're going to be so disappointed in you. And you can say actually proactively to kids in your classroom or in your groups that you work with, or just, if there's ever anything that you feel like you need to tell somebody, know that I'm always here. And again, proactively sharing, if you do tell me something that I have to report, and that's kind of this is what would happen. So again, you're putting the onus in the kid to make that decision. We oftentimes, the social workers that work for Love 146 are very upfront about disclosing that we're mandated reporters. And I cannot tell you how many kids still disclose what has happened to them, knowing we might have said it 10 minutes before that we are going to report what they tell us, but we still seem like someone safe that they can tell it to.
yeah, we have to make sure that students feel seen, they feel heard, they feel valued, and work intentionally on building meaningful relationships, so that they do feel safe, and hopefully that line of communication is open, not just for the negative stuff, obviously, but that they know that we are individuals that they can come to. For those that are listening, what is a message of encouragement that you want to offer them?
For those who are listening, I think what I would say to you is you can have a real difference in a kid's life. And disclosure is not the goal, right? The goal is for a kid to feel like there's someone that cares about them. And, telling kids up front and repeating it often that you're there for them, that you're available, that they could come to you. You may not have a kid that comes to you and discloses trafficking or abuse, but you might have a kid that experiences something at home or experiences something out in the community who will forever remember you as someone who is safe, as
Mm,
someone they felt comfortable going into their classroom. And I think that that's the resiliency, the building of resiliency among kids is such an important part. We oftentimes think of how do we address kind of the victimization, but there's a whole other half to this narrative, which is building up the resiliency. And I think sometimes we forget the role that resiliency and building up resiliency, the buffer that can have in so many kids' life. So
mm,
if you're not sure of is this helpful or am I even doing anything or no one's come and talked to me yet, do I really need to give this spiel every year? You are having an impact. Kids might not come and tell you and they might not thank you, but no, because we hear about the teachers that had impact. When the kids come to us and we say, was there anyone you ever felt that you could go to? They tell us about those teachers that made them feel safe in the classroom.
mm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. You know, I'm curious about the name of your organization. What does Love 146 stand for? My sense is that it stands for something.
Yes, it's one of those strange names that has to have a meaning behind it. And it does, it does. When our founders were kind of had heard about this issue of human trafficking, around the year 2000, they, like many people, first thought, oh, this is something that happens over there, right? In other countries. It's not
Mm.
something that happens here in the
Wow.
United States, right? So they actually went overseas to try to figure out how do we help? This is atrocious. How do we help? And they did something that we don't recommend that people do anymore. You know better, you do better. But back in the 2000s, it was people were just learning about kind of this. And they went undercover with another
Mm.
organization, and in kind of the brothel that they were brought into, there were young girls who were each given a number. And then on the other side of what was a one-way mirror, there were men that were handed menus with the numbers of the girls, associated sexual activities, and prices.
Wow.
And there was one of the girls was named was her number was 146. And unfortunately, a couple of weeks later, when the police did a raid on that brothel, all the girls were gone. But that one girl who at that moment was, um, kind of staring through the one-way mirror. We don't really know what she was thinking, but really did have an impact on our founders. They really wanted to name the organization to remind us, well, this is an issue in terms of trafficking. This is also really about individual children who should never feel like their value is a number.
Mm. Wow. Wow. That's man, my heart is heavy hearing that story. But this is a reality, right? And it's happening all over the world. It's happening here in the United States. I've read articles that talk about trafficking that happens during events such as the Super Bowl. And so I my prayers go out to all those who are experiencing or have experienced in human trafficking and exploitation. And I'm thankful for the work that you are doing, the work that Love 146 is doing, and all the other programs that are attacking this issue. And certainly, we as educators have a responsibility to um, continually remain learning about this and do some preventative work and build awareness, but build connections, build trust with our students and help them to feel safe. So, thank you, Erin. Where can folks follow you? They want to learn more about 146, Love 146, if they want to learn more about the curriculum, more than a number, I believe, is
Yep,
what you
not a
stated.
number. Yep,
Not
yeah,
a number, not a
not
number
a number.
curriculum. Where can folks learn more and get access to these resources?
Sure. So our website is love146.org. We're also on Instagram, on Facebook, LinkedIn, uh, X, formerly known as Twitter. We're kind of on all of the different handles. You can follow us on social media. We do try to put out resources regularly. Right now, if you go to our website, for example, on the top, there's a scroll you can click that says parent resources, where we'll send you a series of emails that gives very practical tips for how to talk to your kids about this issue, how to talk to them about getting a cell phone, internet safety, and really kind of walks you through what happens if you gave too much freedom and now something went wrong. So we try to be very practical in the tips that we give to parents, to caregivers, and to educators, knowing, like you said, that you already have so many things on your plate. I'm a Board of Ed member myself. I appreciate our teachers and our school administrators. You have a lot going on. And sometimes you just really do need those practical tips to help, add this information into what you're already doing.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for your insight. I know I've learned a lot in this short time together, and certainly going to be digging into the resources on your website. I looked at them before, but I want to look a little bit more deeply to make sure that I'm better equipped and that I'm approaching this in a way where I can inform without scaring, right? My
Absolutely.
children or others, but bring folks into the conversation. So. Thank you, Erin. Keep up the great work and look forward to learning more about the work that you were doing with your organization, Love 146.
Thank you so much for having me.